A chill runs down your spine, a familiar tremor that whispers of something lost, something deeply inconvenient that your rational mind strives to ignore. You feel it in the prickle of envy when others soar, in the suffocating grip of inaction when a decision looms, in the way your own desires can feel alien, even monstrous. This is the quiet insistence of the Danide psyche, the slow tightening of cords around your own potential. It's the shadow of Medusa, not the snake-haired monster of ancient tales, but a symbol of a power betrayed, a sovereignty forced into hiding, a rage turned inward to fester. Her story, etched in the stone of our collective memory, is not one of inherent evil, but of violation and defense. Within her coiled locks and petrifying gaze lies a profound truth about the feminine principle, the anima, that our current world finds so unsettling. Societal fears of chaos, of untamed intuition, of a power that cannot be easily controlled, have shaped her into a terrifying figure. Yet, beneath the terror, a vital energy is locked away, a protective force that, when repressed, leads not to safety, but to a profound inner paralysis. We recognize her not in myth alone, but in the quiet desperation of our own lives. The unrealized dreams, the stifled creativity, the relationships that crumble under unspoken resentments, these are the symptoms of her exile. The Medusa myth, when stripped of its sensationalism, reveals a wounded sovereign, a guardian forced to turn her once radiant face into a weapon of defense. To understand her is to begin the arduous, yet necessary, journey of reclaiming the exiled aspects of ourselves, facing the unsettling beauty of the face beneath the mask. The story begins not in darkness, but in a sacred space, a temple meant for honor and devotion. Here, the seeds of betrayal are sown, not by a callous blow, but by a subtle corruption of purpose. Medusa, a priestess of unparalleled beauty and purity, dwelled within this hallowed sanctuary, her life dedicated to divine service. Her very presence was a testament to sacred feminine power, a conduit for an energy that mirrored the deepest mysteries of existence. Yet within these sacred walls, where trust should have been absolute, a violation occurred. It was not a battle of titans, but a desecration, a perversion of sanctity that shattered her world. This rupture wasn't merely a personal tragedy. It was a wounding of sovereignty itself, a profound disrespect for the sacred feminine principle she embodied. The temple, meant to protect and elevate her, instead became the site of her undoing. This primal wound, inflicted in a place of supposed divine protection, set in motion a chain of events that transformed her very essence. The betrayal ripped through the fabric of her being, creating a chasm where trust and adoration once resided. It was the genesis of her formidable power, but a power born from the ashes of profound violation, forever marking her as a figure of tragic, yet potent, defiance. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos just like this. Now let's keep going. The rage that coiled within Medusa was not the unreasoning fury of a brute, but the sharp, potent knowledge of a violation deeply understood. It was the fierce wisdom of one witnessing the sacred defiled, a sacredness that resided not just in temples, but in the very heart of the feminine. Her transformation into the Gorgon was not an arbitrary curse, but a terrifying manifestation of gnosis, a forbidden knowing that society was unwilling to bear. This gnosis was the truth of her own power, brutally suppressed. It was awareness of the divine feminine's potential for fierce protection, for righteous anger that could shake foundations. The world, built on patriarchal order, feared this very knowledge. They feared the intuitive depths, the untamable currents of the feminine spirit that defied easy categorization or control. Medusa's rage encapsulated this fear, turning a potent force into a horrifying spectacle. Her serpentine locks and petrifying gaze became the symbols of this dangerous wisdom, a visible manifestation of what was kept hidden. The feminine rage, when expressed, was deemed monstrous, a deviation from prescribed roles. Yet, in its suppressed form, it festered, becoming a silent, destructive force. Medusa personified this paradox. A terrifying warning, but also a glimpse into a hidden power the world desperately tried to erase. This forbidden knowledge, embodied in her rage, represents a deep feminine truth. The world's fear of her is our own fear of confronting aspects of the feminine that challenge established power structures. But what happens when this potent knowledge is not just feared, but actively repressed? In the next section, we explore the chilling nature of psychic paralysis, a direct consequence of this disavowal. The very sight of her, the legendary Gorgon, was transformed from a reflection of divine power into a force of utter stillness. Her gaze, once perhaps capable of illuminating profound truths, now held the power to freeze the very lifeblood of those caught in its terrible focus. This wasn't merely death. It was a cessation of being, a descent into a permanent, inert state. It was the ultimate psychic defense mechanism, to make oneself utterly untouchable by rendering oneself utterly immobile. This petrification, this turning to stone, is a potent metaphor for how we engage with overwhelming psychic realities. When faced with unbearable truths, with the raw intensity of our own emotions or the unbearable weight of external pressures, the instinct can be to shut down. The fear becomes so profound, the potential for annihilation so real, that the mind creates a fortress of inertness, a frozen landscape where pain cannot penetrate, but where life also cannot flourish. The Medusan gaze, in this sense, becomes an internal shield. It's the soul's desperate attempt to protect itself from further wounding by refusing to engage, by refusing to feel, by refusing to move. It is the paralysis that grips us before a difficult conversation, the inertia that prevents us from pursuing a long-held dream, the emotional numbness that shields us from grief. We become, in essence, our own statues, monuments to a pain too great to bear. This defense, while offering a temporary respite from suffering, comes at an unimaginable cost. It locks away not only pain, but also life's vital energy. To understand this self-imposed petrification is to begin to question the nature of true safety. But what lies beyond this frozen defense? In the next section, we delve into the deeper societal and psychological implications of disowning the feminine principle, exploring Jung's concept of the anima. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine principle within the male psyche, and its profound, often disowned presence. This isn't just about gender roles, it's about the innate balance of energies within every soul. The anima embodies intuition, emotion, creativity, and a connection to the unconscious, qualities our cultures have often relegated to the feminine sphere and consequently undervalued or even feared, especially in men. The historical suppression of the feminine, the systematic devaluation of these intuitive and emotional capacities has had a devastating effect. We've created a world that prizes logic and assertion above all else, leaving little room for the subtler, more complex currents of the psyche. This cultural disavowal creates a void, a spiritual and emotional drought that leaves individuals feeling disconnected, rigid, and incomplete. When the animal is rejected by culture, it is also rejected by the individual. Men, in particular, are often implicitly or explicitly taught to suppress these aspects of themselves, leading to a shallow understanding of their own emotional landscape and a difficulty in forming deep, authentic connections. This denial isn't a sign of strength, but of a profound inner poverty, a self-imposed exile from a vital part of their own being. This rejection creates the fertile ground for a certain kind of suffering, a spiritual ache that has no easy answer in the material world. It's a longing for a wholeness that seems perpetually out of reach. But how does this denial manifest in our relationships and our perception of self? In the next section, we examine the role of the mirror and how its surface can deceive us into a false sense of security. The mirror, a simple tool, holds an astonishing power to reflect. We gaze into it seeking validation, clarity, a confirmation of our existence as we understand it. Yet in the context of our psychological landscape, this same reflective surface can transform into a deceptive shield, particularly when we are trying to avoid confronting certain truths. It becomes a trap of distance, a way to see without truly engaging. Think of how often we use outward appearances, social roles, or intellectual justifications as mirrors. We show the world and ourselves a polished image, a curated self-perception. This reflected self, while familiar, often lacks the depth and complexity of our inner reality. It's like holding a mirror up to a mirror, an infinite regression that never reaches the original source. This distance, created by the reflective surface, prevents us from truly seeing what lies on the other side. We observe ourselves, our actions, our emotions, but we maintain a critical separation. The mirror becomes a barrier, not a bridge, to self-understanding. It allows us to acknowledge the surface of our being without ever having to dive into its depths, a strategy of avoidance masquerading as self-awareness. When confronted with the unsettling aspects of ourselves, with the parts we've disowned, this detached reflection can become weaponized. We might see the qualities we abhor in others, reflected in our own lives, but the mirror's distance allows us to dismiss it, to say, "That's not me." This refusal to let the reflection penetrate, to truly see beyond the surface, is a subtle but powerful form of self-imprisonment. But what are the deeper currents flowing beneath this superficial reflection? In the next section, we explore the primal energy of snakes and their connection to the psyche. Beneath the placid surface of our conscious thought, a more ancient current flows. It is the serpentine wisdom of the psyche, the ever-present, often unsettling, ebb and flow of instinct, intuition, and primal urge. These are the snake-like energies that writhe beneath the carefully constructed edifice of our ego. They are the lifeblood of our unconscious, pulsing with a power that our rational minds often struggle to comprehend or contain. Consider the snake in its natural habitat, fluid, adaptable, deeply connected to the Earth's vibrations. It moves with a sinuous grace, sensing its environment through subtle shifts and hidden currents. This is the nature of our own deep psyche, constantly sensing, constantly adapting, yet often moving through realms beyond our direct awareness. These are the serpentine currents that inform our dreams, our gut feelings, and our deepest fears. When we try to impose a rigid, unyielding structure upon ourselves, when we deny the fluid, sometimes chaotic, nature of our inner world, these serpentine forces don't simply disappear. Instead, they find other ways to express themselves, often in disruptive or unsettling patterns. Repressed emotions can coil and strike, unacknowledged desires can slither into our subconscious, influencing our actions in ways we don't fully understand. The ego, in its attempt to maintain control, often tries to sever this connection, to build walls against these primal energies. But this isn't true mastery, it's a form of psychic amputation. The snake, in its ancient symbolism, represents transformation, healing, and a profound connection to life's mysteries. To acknowledge these serpentine currents within is to begin to understand the very essence of our dynamic, unfolding selves. But what happens when this primal entanglement signifies the beginning of a necessary descent into darkness? In the next section, we explore Medusa's role in the alchemical process of Negrido. The alchemist's journey is one of transformation, of turning base metal into gold, not just in substance, but in spirit. This arduous process begins with the Negrido, the blackening, a phase of dissolution and putrefaction. It is a descent into chaos, a confrontation with the darkest, most unformed aspects of existence, and it is here that Medusa finds her profound alchemical resonance. Her story, in its initial betrayal and subsequent transformation, mirrors this necessary blackening. The Negrido is not merely suffering, it is the essential breakdown of the old order, the dissolution of what no longer serves. It is the confrontation with the shadow, with all that has been repressed, denied, or deemed unacceptable. Medusa, the once radiant virgin, now a terrifying Gorgon, embodies this phase. Her beauty is gone, her form is monstrous, and her gaze turns all to stone, a state of inertness, of death, before rebirth. Her petrifying gaze can be seen as the ultimate manifestation of the ego's resistance to dissolution. The ego clings to its known form, its identity, its carefully constructed reality. When faced with the alchemical call to surrender, to break down into primal elements, it resists. Medusa's power, therefore, becomes a symbol of this resistance, and simultaneously the force that can, through its sheer terror, force that breakdown. This alchemical blackening is vital. Without this descent into the dark, undifferentiated mass, no true transformation can occur. It is the essential prerequisite for any subsequent purification or illumination. Medusa's myth, therefore, serves as a potent sigil for this initial, terrifying stage of inner alchemy. But where else in our history do we find similar figures scapegoated for embodying the disowned feminine? In the next section, we explore this lineage. The narrative of the disowned feminine echoes through history, a recurring theme of blame and exile. Before Medusa's stony gaze became the focus of fear, there was Lilith, cast out for refusing to be subservient, for daring to claim her equality. And after Medusa, in the clinical pronouncements of later eras, came hysteria, a term that pathologized the very energy Medusa channeled, the untamed, intuitive, and often enraged feminine spirit. Lilith's defiance, her refusal to lie beneath Adam, marked her as a demon, an outcast. Her power, derived from her autonomy, was reframed as dangerous and wicked. Similarly, Medusa's transformation, a direct consequence of violation, was interpreted not as a tragedy of a wounded sovereign, but as the birth of a monster. The world preferred to see her rage as innate malevolence rather than a defense against profound injustice. Later, when feminine power began to manifest in ways that unsettled societal norms through intense emotions, passionate expression, or unconventional behavior, it was conveniently labeled as hysteria. This medicalized term effectively silenced and invalidated women, portraying their inner turmoil and strength as a sign of mental derangement. It was another way to control and contain the potent, often disruptive energy of the feminine. These figures, Lilith, Medusa, and the so-called hysterical woman, are all mirrors reflecting society's deep-seated fear and discomfort with untamed feminine power. They are the scapegoats, bearing the burden of what patriarchy cannot tolerate or control. But what is the source of this fear? In the next section, we examine how true sacred power is often perceived as madness by those who seek to dominate. True sacred power, the kind that emanates from a deep connection to the primal source, is often distorted and misunderstood by those who thrive on control. From their perspective, the untamed feminine, the intuitive knowing, the capacity for fierce, protective action, these are not signs of strength, but of chaos, of madness. The very essence of awakened sovereignty becomes a threat to their established order. Those who operate from a place of dominance, who seek to manage and manipulate the world, cannot tolerate a power that arises organically, that flows from an inner wellspring rather than an external decree. They see the wildness, the unpredictability, the inherent divinity in such power and interpret it as a dangerous aberration. It is a language they do not speak, a force they cannot easily harness, and therefore it must be feared and suppressed. Medusa's chilling gaze, her serpentine nature, her defiant stance against those who violated her, these are all manifestations of a sacred power that the forces of control cannot comprehend. They label it monstrous, demonic, or insane because it refuses to be subjugated. The more someone embodies this authentic, unyielding feminine sovereignty, the more likely they are to be cast as a madwoman or a witch in the eyes of the controlling archetype. This perception transformation is not accidental. It is a tool of disempowerment. By labeling sacred power as madness, the controllers aim to discredit it, to make others recoil from it, and to prevent its widespread recognition and embrace. It perpetuates a cycle where true strength is the very thing others are taught to fear. But what is the internal consequence of this external judgment? In the next section, we look inward at self-petrification. The external judgment that labels the sacred as madness often reverberates within, creating a profound internal dissonance. This is the genesis of self-petrification, a slow, quiet turning to stone from within. When the world, and by extension, our own internalized societal voice, tells us that our deepest intuitive insights, our genuine emotional responses, or our inherent feminine power are too much or wrong, we begin to believe it. This internal narrative leads to a form of dissociation, a splitting of the self. One part of us knows the truth of our own being, the wild, potent energy that seeks expression. The other part, the one that has absorbed the external criticism, begins to police this inner landscape. It flags these authentic aspects as dangerous, as things to be ashamed of, and begins to suppress them, to freeze them in place. It's as if we awaken each day with a gaze that turns our own vital energies to stone. The creative impulses that once flowed freely now feel daunting. The intuitive nudges are silenced by doubt, and the capacity for deep emotional connection becomes a source of anxiety. We become observers of our own lives, watching from a distance as our potential solidifies into immobility, a living statue of what we might have been. This self-petrification is a tragic consequence of rejecting the wild, sacred feminine within. It is the soul's fearful attempt to survive in a world that demonizes its most potent aspects, leading to a profound sense of emptiness and alienation. But this phenomenon isn't confined to one gender. How does this denial manifest in the lives of men, particularly in their relationships? In the next section, we examine the projection of the rejected feminine. The repression of the feminine principle, the disavowal of intuition, emotion, and vulnerability doesn't simply vanish from a man's psyche. Instead, it is exiled to the unconscious, where it festers and eventually finds expression through projection. This means that the qualities he denies in himself are then perceived and often harshly judged in the women and feminine energies around him, leading to a catastrophic collapse in relationships. Imagine a man who, conditioned by society, has learned to suppress his own emotional depth. He may see any expression of emotion in his partner as weakness, irrationality, or drama. He doesn't recognize these feelings as a reflection of a part of himself that he has systematically denied. This projection creates a chasm of misunderstanding, where he can never truly connect with the authentic feminine essence, both within himself and in his partner. This occurs not only in romantic relationships, but in all interactions involving feminine archetypes. He might be overly critical of female colleagues, dismissive of intuition in general, or drawn to women who embody the very weaknesses he despises, only to be resentful when they display them. The rejected feminine becomes the dark, projected shadow, haunting his perceptions and poisoning his connections. This relational collapse is not an accident. It is the inevitable outcome of an incomplete psyche. The inability to integrate the anima leads to a fragmented experience of self and other, where genuine intimacy becomes impossible. But beyond the relational sphere, what deeper creative paralysis results from this denial of the feminine? In the next section, we explore the frozen womb of creativity. The denial of the feminine principle has a profound and chilling effect on our capacity for creation. The womb, a potent symbol of creative genesis, represents the fertile ground from which all new life, all new ideas, all new art springs forth. When the feminine, with its inherent connection to life-giving forces and intuitive gestation, is suppressed, this fertile ground begins to freeze. Creativity, in its deepest sense, requires surrender, receptivity, and a willingness to nurture burgeoning ideas in the dark, unseen spaces of the imagination. It is akin to the gestation period within a womb, where potential slowly takes form before its eventual emergence. When the feminine aspect of our psyche is rejected, this nurturing space contracts, becoming barren and resistant to the spark of innovation. We see this in individuals who feel perpetually blocked, whose ideas never seem to materialize, or whose creative endeavors feel forced and unnatural. They are attempting to manifest something new, but the essential feminine energy, the capacity for sustained gestation, for patient nurturing, for embracing the messy, imperfect process of becoming, is absent or actively suppressed. The inspiration may arrive, but the womb remains frozen, unable to hold and develop it. This isn't just an individual crisis, it's a cultural one. Societies that devalue the feminine, that prioritize the linear and the logical over the cyclical and the intuitive, find themselves creatively impoverished. Innovation stagnates, art becomes derivative, and the vital impulse to bring forth newness is stifled. But what if the story of the feminine suppression is not a singular narrative? In the next section, we explore the foundational figures of this suppression. The myth of Medusa is not a solitary legend. It is part of a powerful triad, a collective sigil of the Gorgon sisters that speaks to the layered complexities of the repressed feminine. Uriel and Estheno, her immortal sisters, stand alongside Medusa, each embodying different facets of this powerful, yet demonized, archetype. Together, they represent a potent force that society has consistently sought to contain and fear. Uriel, an immortal Gorgon, represents the enduring, uncapturable nature of the wild feminine. She is the aspect that, though born of divine lineage, transcends mortal understanding and cannot be truly vanquished by mortal means. Estheno, the strongest, embodies the fierce, untamed strength that is often perceived as monstrous when it arises from the feminine. They are not merely monsters, they are primal forces of nature. Medusa herself, though mortal, serves as the focal point of transformation and sacrifice. Her story is the most dramatic illustration of the initial wound, the petrification, and the eventual loss of her head. Yet her sisters remain, a constant reminder that the essence they represent cannot be entirely erased. Their presence suggests that the fear and suppression surrounding the feminine are deeply ingrained and multifaceted. These three figures, intertwined in their ancient mythos, form a collective symbol of the feminine archetype that has been systematically demonized, feared, and misunderstood throughout history. They are the guardians of a hidden power, a vital energy that our world has tried to turn to stone. But what is the meaning behind the violent act that is often depicted as the solution to their power? In the next section, we explore decapitation as initiation. The act of decapitation, so central to the Medusa myth, is often understood as a violent act of destruction, the ultimate defeat. However, within the deeper symbolic language of ancient law and nascent psychology, it can represent a profound alchemical initiation, a necessary loss of the rational mind to allow for the birth of a deeper, soul-level wisdom. It is a symbolic death that precedes a spiritual rebirth. When Perseus beheads Medusa, he is not merely slaying a monster. He is, consciously or unconsciously, engaging with a powerful archetype. The severed head, still potent, becomes a symbol of power transferred, a victory that comes from understanding, not just brute force. But more importantly, the act itself signifies a breaking of the old order, a severing of the ties to the purely rational and superficial self. This loss of the head, the seat of conscious thought and ego identity, is a prerequisite for accessing a more profound level of consciousness. It is a surrender of the analytical mind, which can often be the very thing that petrifies us, preventing us from grasping truths that lie beyond logical comprehension. In this symbolic act, the mind is sacrificed to allow the birth of the soul, a more intuitive, interconnected, and profound aspect of being. It is an initiation into a realm where raw energy and primal truths reign. The danger and terror associated with this act underscore the immense resistance the ego offers to such a surrender. To lose one's head, in this context, is to undergo a radical transformation, a shedding of limitations that allows for a connection to something vaster and more ancient. But from the very blood that spills from this sacred wound, something unexpected and beautiful emerges. In the next section, we explore Venus born from her blood. From the severed neck of the slain Gorgon, a new life, a new beauty, a divine essence is born. The blood of Medusa, spilled upon the sands, gives rise to figures of extraordinary power and grace, most notably Aphrodite or Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. This emergence is not coincidental. It speaks to a profound truth about the nature of beauty and creation itself, that it can arise from the deepest wounds. The horror of Medusa's demise, the primal trauma, and the ultimate sacrifice paradoxically becomes the fertile ground for the birth of exquisite allure. It suggests that the very forces we deem monstrous or destructive, when eventually understood and integrated, can transform into the source of our greatest aesthetic and emotional richness. Beauty, therefore, is not born from an absence of pain, but often from its very crucible. This alchemical transformation is key. It implies that by confronting and moving through the most terrifying aspects of ourselves and our myths, we can unlock a potent creative energy. The anguish and the rage, when ultimately transmuted, can blossom into compassion, love, and an appreciation for the sublime. The fearsome Gorgon becomes the mother of the most cherished aspects of human experience. This birth from blood signifies that pain and beauty are intrinsically linked, intertwined in the grand tapestry of existence. The wound, when honored and understood, does not remain a source of devastation. It becomes a fount of profound creation. But if beauty can emerge from such darkness, why do we still struggle to see the true face beneath the monstrous mask? In the next section, we consider the sacred mask we still wear. We stand before Medusa, or what we perceive as Medusa, and recoil. We see the snakes, the petrifying gaze, the monstrous visage, and we are terrified. Yet what we are truly seeing is a sacred mask, a protective layer deliberately constructed, not just by the myth itself, but by centuries of our own fear and misunderstanding. This mask conceals a truth so profound, so vital, that we have become accustomed to averting our eyes. The mask is the accumulated societal judgment, the reframing of feminine power as inherently dangerous. It is the projection of our own disowned aspects onto a single symbolic figure. We have been taught, through art, literature, and cultural narratives, to see a monster, and thus, our perception has been irrevocably shaped. The terror is not in what she inherently is, but in what we have been conditioned to believe she is. This sacred mask serves a dual purpose. For the archetype itself, it is a form of protection, a way to ward off those who are not ready to perceive the deeper truths. For us, it is a barrier, a defense mechanism that allows us to engage with the idea of powerful feminine energy without confronting its raw, transformative potential directly. It is a safer, more palatable representation. The inability to see her true face is a reflection of our own internal state. We have exiled the snake-haired essence from our own psyches, and therefore can only perceive its distorted reflection. The mask is a testament to our collective resistance to fully integrating the wild, intuitive, and potent aspects of the feminine. But what if the key to seeing beyond the mask lies in reawakening a lost capacity within ourselves? In the next section, we explore the re-emergence of snake consciousness. Amidst the frozen landscapes of our self-imposed paralysis, a subtle stirring begins. It is the reawakening of snake consciousness, the serpentine intuition that has been lying dormant beneath the layers of ego and societal conditioning. This is not a rational understanding, but a primal knowing, a deep, instinctual awareness that flows through the very currents of our being, much like the fluid movement of a snake. This consciousness is ancient, predating our complex cognitive structures. It is the wisdom of the body, the deep memory held within our cells, the intuitive grasp of patterns and connections that logic often misses. It is the ability to sense subtle shifts in energy, to understand unspoken truths, and to navigate the world with an innate, untamed intelligence. It is the wild, untethered aspect of our feminine anima. To reclaim snake consciousness is to embrace the fluidity, the adaptability, and indeed, the potent sting of intuition. It means learning to trust the subtle messages from our unconscious, to allow ourselves to move with nature's rhythms rather than against them. It is a process of shedding the old skins of denial and assumption, much like a snake shedding its exuviae, to reveal a renewed and more vital self. This reawakening is not about becoming dangerous, but about becoming aware. It is about recognizing the inherent power that resides not just in reason, but in the deep, instinctual wisdom that has been systematically disdained. It is the return of a vital connection to the primal forces that drive life itself. But what is the ultimate outcome of embracing this deeper, serpentine knowing? In the next section, we explore the profound act of facing the mirror and remembering ourselves. The ultimate confrontation, then, is not with a terrifying external monster, but with the reflection in the mirror. To face her is to gaze into the depths of the archetype, the symbol of the rejected feminine, the wounded sovereign, the potent intuition that we have long denied. It is to allow the snake-haired visage, the formidable power, the very essence of Medusa, to be seen not as an other, but as an intrinsic part of ourselves. When we finally allow ourselves to truly see, without the veil of fear and societal conditioning, we begin to recognize the familiar contours within the mythologized image. The petrifying gaze is our own self-censorship. The coiled snakes are our repressed instincts. The wounded sovereignty is our own unrealized potential. The mirror, no longer a shield of distance, becomes a portal to profound self-recognition. This act of seeing is not an end point, but a beginning. It is the moment of remembrance, where the exiled aspects of our psyche, the vital feminine energies, are welcomed back into the fold. It is the complex, often uncomfortable, realization that the monster we have feared and fought against, both externally and internally, has always been a part of us, waiting to be acknowledged and integrated. To see her is to remember yourself, not as the fragmented or idealized version you have presented to the world, but as